Hi everyone, my name is Joseph and welcome to Digimon Seekers Chapter 3, Part 9, Unit 11, Digital Missing in Action. So before we begin, this is the part where we finally get back, we being the audience, we finally get back to the present timeline, and I really enjoyed how they begin it with the dialogue. I believe the last time we were with EG and Logomon, it did end with I want to help Postmon too, our friend, and we pick up at that point. Before we continue forward, I just wanted to put a quick disclaimer. As one can tell, I do have multiple pets, not just my cat. I have two cats, a dog, and some rabbits as well. And because of that, I personally don't call my pets or anyone else's pets it. When I know the pet's pronoun, I do use she or he. And I've noticed that Bandai is starting to utilize pronouns more efficiently. But I'm also noticing, so they're using they, them for Digimon, but they're also switching between the word it and itself as well. And I personally don't like that. So I'm going to keep saying they, them, but when instead of saying it, I'm more than likely I'm going to gender the Digimon. For me, Logomon does look like a boy from the pictures and the way that he's acting as well, and Postmon too. So I'm just putting that as a disclaimer at the forefront. I don't mean to be offensive or to offend anyone, but I wanted to make sure that I was up front in case anyone was curious about that, because there are a couple passages with the they and the it pronouns. But again, I don't like saying it. Especially because I know one could argue that I'm sorry, pointing at my cat, that Digimon are AI or essentially not real. But my counter argument to that, excuse me, I was going back because I jumped from the page to the video time quick player. I'm going back to the quick player. But my counter argument to that would be how Seekers has been constantly emphasizing that Digimon are alive. And I think I explained this in one of my previous videos. I think what they being the writers, what they meant to imply was that not just Digimon are alive, but they're sentient and sapient. And the difference between sentient and sapient is that with sapience, one is able to form an I, essentially, and self, while it's with sentience, you're just aware of yourself, but you're not forming the self. So hopefully that makes sense, the difference between sentience and sapience. And I would argue, again, that Digimon Seekers is really emphasizing that Digimon are alive, they are sapient. Anywho, let's go ahead and get started. So the first quote, Leon Alexander, hacker Elias Judge sacrificed himself to save E.G. He grabbed the Royal Knight and threw himself into a vortex. E.G. had never known such regret. Regret for harboring such enmity. Regret for harboring such enmity toward Leon simply because he was a hacker and E.G. was a code cracker. For following through on the SOC's request to take revenge on Leon. For even taking Professor Ruzenji up on his job offer in the first place. Logomon, for their part, wasn't vomiting in the toilet through a veil of tears. They simply wanted to help Postmon because he felt like it was the right thing to do. So what I like about this quote is that it may seem simple at first, but I think it really shows a lot of self-reflection on E.G.'s part. Self-reflection as in, this really humanizes E.G. What he's doing right here is self-reflecting, but I'd argue there's two ways to self-reflect. The productive way and I don't want to call it the non-productive way, but maybe the more emotional point of view. So when I say productive, I mean when one self-reflects, it does hurt, right? Especially if it's an incident where there was personal emotions involved. But usually when one self-reflects in a positive, constructive way, they pinpoint where the hurt is coming from. Then one develops coping skills and they move forward from there, right? When I say the emotional point of view, I mean that sometimes we think about the past, but rather than critiquing the past to try to move forward, we think about the past for nostalgic reasons or because we feel guilty or some strong sense of emotion. And I would argue that's what's going on right here. E.G. is feeling quite guilty because of what has occurred. And I think it is cool that he is self-reflecting, not this regret that he's harboring. But there's some regret that I think he is being too emotional about. And one of them is that last one for even taking Professor Rigenji up on his job offer in the first place. We being the audience, we've seen how E.G. working with the professor has really opened doors for E.G. and the realm of code cracking. So if E.G. was in a better state of mind, I think we could ask him, does he really mean that last sentence for taking up the job offer? And I don't think he truly means that. Just right now he's upset. And the reason why I say that humanizes him is because, well, oftentimes we as people, we tend to do that. We think about the past and we we place extra blame where it's not needed, and thus we feel like, oh man, I should not have made that choice in the first place. So I just like this again because it really humanizes Eiji. Really awesome protagonist in my opinion. And then also like Logomon. At the end, Logomon, for their part, wasn't vomiting in the toilet through a veil of tears. So that line again, even though Eiji is feeling accountable, it really shows how much it's eating away at him. Not only is he feeling bad, but he's also physically reflecting this through his tears and his vomit. Logomon, on the other hand, I would argue that Logomon, not that he's happy, he's feeling the consequence of this decision as well, of this the consequence of the fight between himself and Postmon or Kazukimon. But the difference being, I think, again, is that Logomon, he's trying to push forward, move ahead, and also because obviously Logomon doesn't feel as guilty or as accountable, thus the lack of tears. But I don't think that signifies that Logomon doesn't care. I want to emphasize that. Just because the way that it ends, Logomon simply wanted to help Postmon because he felt like it felt like the right thing to do. So moving forward, Logomon saw Postmon as a friend. Ichi saw himself as a code cracker, and that made Leon a hacker. Well, they were adults now, things were different, and they couldn't be friends anymore. Or so Ichi wanted to believe. Something that I really liked about the previous quote that leads into this quote as well. So I'm going to go back to that previous quote. This portion right here, regret for harboring such enmity toward Leon simply because he was a hacker and Ichi was a code cracker. In combination with the line that I just read, Ichi saw himself as a code cracker that made Leon a hacker. Well, they were adults now, things were different, they couldn't be friends anymore. That's, I would argue, Ichi's trying to justify the fact that they separated. They were no longer friendly with one another. The fact that Ichi felt like he needed to fight with Leon just because of labels, external labels that made Ichi feel like he had to take certain courses of action. I just really like that small detail because it really emphasizes how Ichi is again, in the beginning of the story, everyone kept saying that Ichi was a foolish individual, but these details that Ichi is picking up on, I think, is textual evidence to suggest that Ichi is not a stupid individual. He's aware that instead of acting upon these ideas of what labels and what labels does for an individual, what it entails, Ichi instead sort of saw the individual in relation to the label. So in other words, he should have seen Leon as his friend first and then as a hacker. So then try to have a conversation with him at the base level, e.g. not as the code cracker, but e.g. as the individual, and try to come to bearings on why they both went on the path that they did. I would argue they were kind of trying to do this. They had their conversation in the cafe, and then of course the fight at the end. They were having small bits of conversation, some bits of discourse. But again, I would argue it should have been longer and more than one cafe setting, right? And especially because I'd argue that cafe setting was a bit of a professional setting. It would have been better to go to a personal setting and have a real conversation, be it either at someone's place or at another coffee shop, at a Starbucks, for example. Or I guess I prefer Coffee Bean personally, so I'll use the Coffee Bean as an example instead. But yeah, so I like those two quotes and what it entails for E.G. as an individual. Moving forward, Logomon. I'm the reason your Digivolve held Logomon and went berserk in the first place, E.G. muttered dejectedly. E.G. knew the power his emotions had over Logomon whenever he was inside the Digicore. In some cases, the emotions of a partner human were beneficial to Digivolution, but they could just as easily be disruptive. Logomon had no reason to match E.G.'s intensity and Digivolve into his ultimate form, absent the pressure from his partner. Yeah, that's a great point. I would never screwed up that badly, Logomon chirped, rolling over onto his back and wiggling his fluffy belly. I just felt the need to beat him, to walk over him on the way to walk over him on the way to greater things. The code cracker in me felt compelled. Yeah, well, I wasn't about to lose to Postmon either. That's the difference. You didn't want to lose. I was terrified of losing. E.G. figured he would lose the trust of the SOC, and Professor Ruzenji would stop sending him work. I'll be back to my unpredictable, unstable life. I just couldn't face that, he said, finally saying what had been on his mind. It didn't sound all that embarrassing now that he said it, but it was difficult to give voice to nonetheless. Well then let's help him already. I'll save Postmon, you save Leon. Yeah, let's do it, E.G. said, wiping the vomit from his mouth. They had to do it. So I think this quote is really cool. Gives a lot of insight into E.G. as an individual, and again, I think this humanizes him. The reason why he's feeling so much guilt is because he's coming to realize that there was a lot of accountability on Ichi's part. The only reason why Logomon evolved into Hell Logomon is, as Ichi points it out, was because of him and his point of view, Ichi's emotions. For Logomon, Logomon just didn't want to lose. Losing would mean, oh man, now Postmon has bragging rights over Logomon, right? But for Ichi, losing meant, oh no, my livelihood is going to go away. This new chapter of my life is now going to end. I've been proven to be not distrustful, but not very useful to the professor in the end, and thus is going to take the linker strap away. So that fear of losing is what really impacted Ichi and moving forward. Did Logomon want to lose? No, of course not. But was Logomon afraid of losing? Probably not. One could argue it's probably because Logomon is a little bit arrogant, a little bit egotistical. But I would argue again, if push comes to shove, if one could ask Logomon, do you mind losing in terms of the ego? If Logomon will probably say, well, if it's just a fun battle, a fun little bout, what difference does it make? If it's a real battle, on the other hand, to save like the fate of the universe or the world or whatever, society, that would be different. But that's really not associated with ego, right? Because then if one loses, it's not just you losing, but everyone else losing as well. So what am I trying to emphasize here? The fact that Ichi was afraid of losing, quite literally says so right here. He was terrified of losing. While as for Logomon, losing wasn't really at the forefront. He just wanted to beat his friend. And why was why was Postmon Logomon's friend? Because Postmon was not being viewed as a cracker, as a code cracker. Let me start over. Postmon was not being viewed by Logomon as a hacker Digimon, but rather as a Digimon who so happens to work as a hacker. And I would argue that Postmon was viewing Logomon not as a code cracker's Digimon, but again, rather as a Digimon who so happens to work with the code cracker. So what I'm trying to emphasize right here is that the label of Digimon was at the forefront over code cracker and hacker. So essentially, Logomon was Logomon before he was a code cracker, and Postmon is Postmon before he's a hacker. And again, I think this adds a lot of insight for Ichi's characterization. The fact that he's able to self-reflect and recognize and pinpoint what it is that made him feel so terrified. Like, I think that says a lot about him as an individual. I'm gonna make sure that's everything I want to discuss. I also like this quote because, again, Logomon's personality has to bubble up a little bit. Ichi, who's being serious, admits that it was his own fault that Logomon evolved into Hell Logomon. And Logomon, instead of being a little bit more supportive, he jokes and he's a bit comical about the situation. But I don't think Logomon is being abrasive or being brash to be a jerk. Logomon's just being Logomon. It's just how he is, right? So hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, and then lastly, I guess I want to reread this one quote. I'll be back to my unpredictable, unstable life. I just couldn't face that. Finally saying what he had been on his mind. Sometimes when there's certain things that makes one feel bad, it does feel good to say it out loud and to finally hear it. Especially if one feels like they're being immature. When you actually do hear it out loud, you might realize, oh, well, those fears were quite reasonable. Those fears were justified. I only mentioned that last part because it says after that. It didn't sound all that embarrassing now that he said it, but it was difficult to give voice to nonetheless, right? So again, it's fine to acknowledge your emotions, but that's always going to be hard to do, to acknowledge those emotions in the first place. But it shouldn't be an embarrassing thing to do. But one does have to be emotionally strong, emotionally intelligent to be able to give voice and actually understand what it is that one is voicing. And then, of course, I like how it ends. Let's do it. Ichi said, wiping the vomit from his mouth. They had to do it. So the shift from being lost to wanting to exert one's agency to remedy the situation. I really do appreciate that about Ichi. The same apartment he'd been in with this ability he so desperately wanted to protect, but it was his. His mind and body had already hit rock bottom. He'd seen scarier things than losing a fight. Alright, Ichi, mind link. You got it. Ichi shot back, tapping the Digimon linker, and Eric greeted him for his trouble. The vital check failed. We can't mind link, Logomon said with a sigh. Or rather, ish. That bad? It's EESH, but I'm gonna say instead. That bad? Ichi knew he wasn't in a great place mentally, but had he really wasted away physically too? Rest is required between mind linking sessions in order for the body to recover. Clearly, despite lying motionless under the covers in his futon for several days, E.G. hadn't actually been resting. So what I like about this line so much is that it gives us a time frame. It's been multiple days since the incident with Leon. Again, I think this picks up from where chapter 2 ends, so I don't think there's been any more time difference between those flashbacks. But it does give us a time reference from when the incident with Leon occurred. And what I also like to hope, this might be my English side coming out, my English major side, but what I also like to hope is that when it's stated at the bottom, rest is required between mind linking sessions. Despite lying motionless for several days, E.G. hadn't actually been resting. I like to think that the wellness check, the vital check, is not just in terms of physical, but also mental health as well, psychological health. So if the vital bracelet, or I guess in this instance the linker strap, the linker strap detects, the Digimon linker detects that you're physically well, but mentally you're not okay, it still wouldn't allow one to digivolve, especially because it seems like emotions play such a strong role when it comes to the relationship between the mind linker and their digital partner. But we don't really have enough textual evidence to suggest that. It might just be that since EG's not feeling well physically, that's why he can't mind link. But I just wanted to point that out. I would love it if it's both aspects. One has to be physically well, but also mentally well too. Yeah, that's everything I want to discuss with this quote. Is it? Yeah, I guess I just really appreciate how there's being a bigger emphasis on mental health, not just physical health. Despite E.G. being in his futon, he didn't rest up. Why didn't he rest up? Well, because he was struggling eternally. I like that a lot. Continuing forward, that lock's easy enough to bypass. Easy, you say, E.G. replied, eager to hear more. Then again, if I do let you back into my Digicore, I might go berserk for a point. E.G. wouldn't want someone as atrophied and strung out as him hitching a ride in his soul either. We'll have to find some way of looking for them from here. Logomon words brought E.G. back to reality. How could they possibly search for Leon and Postmon from the real world? What happened to Koichimon once they passed through the hole in the hole the vertex opened in the firewall? Look, I don't know how to contact a Digimon that's fallen into a vertex either. And that's what you're going to ask, Logomon said preemptively. You couldn't ask around the Waslam? I did a bit of that while you were zoned out in your on your futon, but I didn't get anywhere. Nobody knows what's beyond the firewall. E.G. could post a reward for Postmon's capture on Grim, but some street rat code cracker asking the Digimon of the Waslam to do something they didn't know how to do wasn't going to get them anywhere. So there's two aspects I like about this code. The first one being that Logomon, even though I would argue he does care about E.G. and he does care about finding Leon and Postmon, he also is keeping himself at the forefront. He could easily bypass the lock that's preventing E.G. from mind linking with Logomon, but he's not going to do it. Why? Well, because Logomon's keeping in mind that E.G.'s emotional state has a big influence and impact on what's going to occur with Logomon when he digivolves. So they've successfully evolved to Logomon a couple times, but the one time they tried to go beyond that, it didn't go so well, right? So I don't blame Logomon so much for being a bit concerned. If I do let you back into my Digicore, I might go berserk. And I love how he leaves it open at that. He doesn't end his sentence. And E.G. doesn't reprimand Logomon for thinking the way that he does, right? Instead, he says for a point. And he actually agrees with Logomon. E.G. wouldn't want someone as atrophied and strung out as E.G. hitching a ride in his soul either. So I just really appreciate how the consequence of mind linking of joining with the Digicore is being emphasized right here. It's not just a simple matter of getting into one's car. You're quite literally getting into another being's consciousness. And in fact, some of us should probably take riding a car more seriously, right? Never drink and drive or drive under the influence of any substances. Because obviously that poor car is probably thinking to themselves, oh no, I don't want this jugged out individual behind the wheel of cars who are able to talk, right? The taxi from Roger Rabbit comes to mind. Anywho, that was a bit of a tangent, but I think it kind of connects. But yeah, I do like that a lot, how Inji totally gets Logomon's point of view. And then beyond that, I love how they just seem, they being EG and EG and Logomon have this really cool synergy going on. EG's thinking to himself, well, damn, well, can't we go around asking? And Logomon's like, well, you better not think about asking me to go asking around because I actually already did that. No one knows what's going on, right? So that's really cool. And also, that really shows how Logomon has a lot of agency too. How EG was bedridden, Logomon didn't just lay around doing nothing. Rather, Logomon was being proactive and trying to do his own bit and trying to figure out how to help Leon and Postmon. Also, really small matter of detail, but before this part, I always thought that the Digimon were just in the linker strap. But I'm loving apparently that essentially these linker straps are a lot like the PETs from Battle Network, Mega Man Battle Network, than I give them credit for. Because if one is unaware, with PETs, the net navis are not stuck in the PET. They could walk around the internet, the net, as well. And it's cool how the Digimon are able to do the same thing. So, small detail, but I think it's a really cool detail that Logomon is able to not be with EG. He's making the choice to be with EG currently. And then lastly, I just like how EG, despite being, what's the word? He was so down in the gutter, and then he gets his second win back. And even though the rug was pulled out from under his feet during his second win, right? Oh, he can't mind link. That's not stopping him from still thinking critically, thinking forward. He thinks about putting that message on Grim, but then he also is being realistic. Well, if I did that, that's just going to make myself feel better, as in I actually did an action, when in reality that action is an inaction, because let's be realistic. Who's going to help some random code cracker? Rather, what Digimon from the Wasp Slum is going to help some random code cracker, right? That's not going to get anyone anywhere. So why waste the time? So I think, again, that's really cool and reflective of EG's self-reflective capabilities. He's making sure to act efficiently rather than wasting his energy. I think that's really cool. Moving forward, a doorbell rang. No, EG's doorbell rang. He hadn't ordered anything, so it couldn't be a delivery. A door-to-door salesperson. A noise complaint from a neighbor who thought he was being too loud. EG had to see who it was. He silently got up and worked his way over to the monitor attached to the doorbell. There was no one to be seen. Wait, no. He could just make out the shoulder of someone's jacket at the edge of the frame. Someone was doing their best to hide. They totally legitimate behavior. Easy enough to avoid, though. He just had to pretend not to be home. And the Digimon linker on his wrist let out a chime. Whoa! A message notification from Tartarus. I'm at your apartment right now. Tartarus or not, whoever it was definitely knew EG was home now that he'd been startled to giving himself away. You're in there, aren't you, Codecracker Fang? A deep voice bellowed through the door. EG knew it in an instant. So, what I like about this quote is how EG, he's very much like, I want to say, us, the readers. I don't know about everyone else, but whenever someone does knock at my door and it's unexpected, I was not expecting any visitors, any deliveries, anything like that, I much prefer to not speak with that individual. I don't mind talking on the phone. When people call me on the phone, I don't mind picking up the phone whatsoever. Or again, if someone's going to come by answering the door. Or actually, let me rephrase that. If someone knocks on my door and it's not someone that I'm familiar with, I don't want to open that door. If it's like a friend or a family member, of course, I don't mind opening the door because sometimes emergencies does occur. All right, but when it's just strangers, like for example, recently someone, I don't know if this ever happens to you guys, but someone painted the street numbers, the address on the side of the sidewalk for free for charity. I was unaware about that, but they left a note, and I totally forgot about that note. They were going to come back for donations. I was like, oh man, who is this individual? I don't know who they are. So, again, when it's strangers, I much prefer to have them just leave whatever it is, and I'll contact them at a future point. And I can't help but feel like this is what's coming from EG as well. Well, he doesn't want to be talking with anyone currently, and he doesn't know who's at the door. And in fact, this person is trying to hide from the camera, right? So why should EG take the time to speak with this individual? But as it turns out, it is someone that he's familiar with. It's Tartarus. What I also like about this is how Tartarus is self-aware. He's hiding from the doorbell, obviously, I would argue, to not give facial evidence or to not get caught in security footage. Pretty straightforward, right? And I just like how Tartarus is just upfront as well. He rings the doorbell, but also makes sure to send a message to EG. I would like to think that Tartarus is forth-thinking enough that he recognizes that, well, why would anyone answer the doorbell when you're not showing your face, and also when it's unannounced, right? Tartarus is really at his door, but now you hear other voices bleeding through the door on the intercom. Hey, You the leader of the SOC? Yeah, what of it? You startled me. Except there wasn't even a hint of surprise in the reply. EG froze. What the? Logomon, where'd you go? EG whisper shouted. The Digimon's hollow-eyed form was nowhere to be seen. They hadn't stepped out through that wall, had they? Hollow-eying in front of anyone other than EG outside the DDL was a violation of the contract EG signed with Professor Ruzenji. The electric lock slid open with a mechanical whir and a thunk. The locks on these cheap apartments were child's play for any Digimon to hack. The door slid open and Logomon slid in through the crack. Hey, EG, the real life Tartarus is standing out there. Some old guy. You gotta be kidding me. So, there's a lot going on with this quote. Right off the bat, I'm not gonna lie, I do find Tartarus' reply to be a little bit confusing. Hey, you're the leader of the SOC. Yeah, what of it? You startled me. The startled me portion, I'm not entirely sure why Kosuke would say, or Tartarus would say something like that. Excuse me. I like how, despite me not understanding what exactly that entails, what that means, I do like how it portrays Kosuke. I think Kosuke's trying to go down emotionally to Ichi's level right now. I think Kosuke's aware that he's Tartarus, the leader of the SOC, and what he's doing right now is coming to visit someone who's not well. We'll come back to that shortly because we're going to see that Kosuke's a lot more aware than the audience might give him credit for, and so. Because of that, he might just be trying to make sure, trying to let EG know that everything's okay, that he's not here as a boss, but rather here just as another human being, here as a person for emotional support. So maybe that's what that line means. You startled me. He's just trying to connect and bring himself lower to EG's level. Except there wasn't even a hint of surprise in the reply. So anyways, yeah, I just find that detail interesting. What I also like is how EG, even though he's being shocked and surprised in his emotional state of mind, he's still very quite professional. He keeps in mind, oh no, whereas Logomon, part of his contract was to keep Logomon secret, to not have him reveal himself, and yet lo and behold, here in this instance, Logomon is just doing what he wants to do. It's a very minor detail, but again, it just really shows how EG is a responsible and professional individual, or rather, at least he tries to be when he can. We can't really blame EG for Logomon revealing himself because, again, Logomon's always been, I said this before, but a lot like Terriermon. He has a lot of agency, a lot of care for the community, but he's also very, he likes to act for himself, right? But yeah, and also like, I think it's implied here that the door opens because of Logomon. Logomon sees that it's Tartarus, and so Logomon opens the door, and so that's why EG says, you gotta be kidding me. That you gotta be kidding me is there's multiple facets to it. Hey EG, the real life Tartarus is standing out there. Some old guy. You gotta be kidding me. And then there's ellipses that I think this is referring to you gotta be kidding me. Why are you talking about Tartarus in this manner? But also you gotta be kidding me. Why did you just open the door if you knew who this was, right? So it's just really cool. I find it really adorable. So moving forward, after this, we're gonna have 3 more quotes. At least get some tea going, EG. You've got a visitor. EGmon. Logomon said gruffly. Yeah. Oh, don't go out of your way for me. Besides, I imagine you don't have tea at the ready anyhow, living on your own like you do. This isn't a bad little space. How big is it? It's 3 tatami. One of those trendy small rooms, eh? Well, a loft, a dedicated shower, electronic lock, intercom, a small kitchen. Tartarus peered into the toilet, the door to which was wide open. Wow. You even got a fancy washlet toilet. I wouldn't mind living here myself. Yeah, but when you sit down on the toilet, your knees prevent the door from shutting and the walls are thin. We can hear the neighbors getting all snuggly and mushy, Logomon quickly added. The apartment I lived in as a student was a wood-framed building that was around 40 years old by the time I moved in. It was infested with rats. Is this for your parents? The man asked, pressing his hands together as he knelt down before the small altar. EG had no idea what the etiquette was for someone barging into your house and then paying their respects, and simply lowered his head in thanks. The WW flight. What an awful accident. Tartarus had clearly done his homework on EG's story. So this is probably the lead up to my favorite part of this, my favorite section of this part of Digimon Seekers, of chapter 3 so far. But we'll come back to that shortly, because it will make more sense with the next quote. What I like so much about this quote is how Logomon is, he's just so He's just such an interesting character. He reminds me, excuse me, he reminds me so much of Terriermon, but also just with a leadership quality to him as well. So kind of like a Terriermon merged with the Renomon. A little bit of Gabumon I see. Maybe that's just me saying that because I do like Gabumon a lot. But I love how Logomon, he's the one that just lets Tartarus in, even though it's not his apartment. And then he reminds EG, whoa, let's get some tea ready for him. And then when Tartarus is giving out these compliments about EG's where he lives, Logomon has to throw in, well, the only bad thing about that toilet is that it doesn't close all the way when one is sitting on it, implying that Logomon sees EG when he's using the toilet. And also how he states the walls are thin, we could hear the neighbors. It's just Logomon, he has no filter or social etiquette, I feel like. He just kind of talks. I do like that about him a lot. And very assertive, but very assertive, but a bit of a not a bully, but a bit of a eccentric, an eccentric kind of agency. So yeah, so I love how that Logomon's being characterized right here. Now let's talk about Koski. It's so cool how this is the first time Koski is meeting with EG in the flesh, and yet despite that, he's so warm. I would argue he's trying to create an environment where Koski could talk comfortably and honestly and forthcoming with EG. And this really shows how Koski is an individual who is not just a villain, but a person who we don't really know his true goal yet. But I would argue at this point, I don't think it's bad. There's a reason why he's trying to achieve his objective, and the reason that so many other individuals are working with him, right? And also, what I really appreciate about this quote is how Koski, he's just so, the way he operates is so, what's the word, carrying. The way he goes from giving compliments to EG's place where he lives, and then he shifts over to seeing his parents and giving respects. He doesn't just say, "Oh, is that for your parents?" He's asking if that's for his parents, and he still does a sign of respect. He didn't need to do that, Koski, right? He could have waited for confirmation and then gave sign of respect, but instead Koski did it right away. I think that says a lot about him as an individual. I would like to think, again, this might be me overanalyzing it, but if EG has said, "Oh no, actually that shrine is for," because he used to have a dog, right? That shrine is actually for my dog. The one over there, the other shrine that's out of view, you can't see it yet, that's the one for my parents. I feel like Koski wouldn't take it back. He wouldn't take back the sign of respect that he showed. He'd go, "Oh yes, with dogs, they are quite lifelong partners, aren't they?" And then giving respects to the to the parents' shrine as well. Really cool little tidbit, not tidbit, but really cool characterization. I'll try not to use the same word again, but really cool portrayal of how Koski is as an individual. The WW flight with an awful accident, the way he's offering, what's the word, sympathies. So continuing forward, EG's parents had indeed died as a result of the Digimon attack on their flight, but their bodies were never recovered, and no funeral was held. After a month, they were presumed dead. EG filled out the paperwork, had mortuary tables engraved in their honor, and set up the small altar in their honor. The money the airline paid out to accident victims was long gone for a variety of reasons, and the money he got from selling his parents' house merely offset. Excuse me, everyone. That one my cat dropped something. The money he got from selling his parents' house merely offset the remaining payment on the mortgage. That left their life insurance payments, which had since been spent on daily necessities. EG had no bandwidth for high school entrance exams and joined the ranks of the unemployed until he discovered the world of code cracking. So this is just a really smart quote. I'm not going to lie. Most of this is refresher for the rest of the audience. But what I really appreciate about this passage is how it really situates EG and where he is currently in his life. At the start of the story, as the audience, we don't know much about him, obviously. He's living on his own. We find out that he's an orphan. We find out that he's not in college, and are we meant to judge him? And I would argue no. We find out that he's not in college because, well, he could have, but unfortunately because of life circumstances, he wasn't allowed to go down that route. I think the reason why I like this quote so much because it really emphasizes how life is in the real world. We could have plans, but something as sudden as an accident could change everything, right? And this is obviously a very drastic accident. I would argue it's not too often where there's a plane crash. And in fact, that it is quite rare to happen in the real world. and whenever it does occur, a lot of steps are taken into effect to prevent it from happening again in the future. But accidents in general do happen, right? Car accidents, walking, pedestrian accidents. So excuse me, car accidents, pedestrian accidents, just random health issues. And unfortunately, when one passes away, if you have a sibling, a kid, a niece that you're a guardianship, your passing might have a really big impact on those in your community. And we're seeing how that occurred with EG. If it wasn't for this plane accident, I would argue that EG would not be a code cracker. He probably would have followed the same steps as Leon, maybe not gone to the same prestigious university, but he would be pursuing some kind of college education. But we mustn't remember, we being the audience, why did EG not forgo? Why did EG not choose that path? Why did he forgo it? It was because of the incident with his parents. After all of that occurred, EG's life drastically. Excuse me, everyone. Sorry, I'm gonna drink some water. Sorry about that. That was embarrassing. Hopefully, everything was good. As I was saying, EG's life drastically changed after his parents' passing, and so I just really appreciate how this passage, even though it's a bit small, really helps to situate where where EG's at currently. So going back to Koski, here I brought you some supplies. The man said, placing a convenience store bag on the floor. EG looked inside to find a sports drink and a bottle of tea within. EG's voice was a dry rasp. Just take it, EG. You haven't had anything in ages, Logomon urged. I thought that might be the case. That's why I came, Tartarus said. What do you mean? EG asked, befuddled. Someone very important to me went DMIA too. It was my fault. I didn't eat anything for a good long while. I replayed the moment endlessly in my head, regretting every little thing I didn't do differently. Threw up, drowned my sorrows in alcohol, lost all hope, and threw up again for good measure. Wait, DMIA? Who? When? EG asked, frantically trying to piece the story together. This was Tartarus, the leader of the SOC. The same Tartarus who never let a single person at any of his missions go DMIA, wasn't it? So this is the other quote. I should have read this one in connection with the previous, not the previous one I just read, but the one before that, the one that was about Koski and the shrine. This really says a lot about Koski. He's obviously aware that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the SOC was aware that EG and Leon were friends, or that they had any sort of relations. Yet in this instance, Tartarus is completely coming off clean and admitting that he was, well, I would argue that he's aware that Leon had a personal relationship with Leon. And I really love as well how Tartarus is, again, as I said earlier, I think the reason why he was being very friendly was because he was trying to create an environment where he can be forthcoming, and thus he's able to talk about Saya. Obviously right here is a reference to Saya, even if her name's not being mentioned, and I think that's very awesome. Makes me so excited for the next part, because maybe we're finally going to get what is Tartarus Koski's objective. What is he doing with the Sons of Chaos? What I also like about this passage is that it also further humanizes Koski. We, as the audience, already knew that Koski took Saya's DMIA quite personally, as from the parts that we just read previously. Right here to get confirmation straight from his mouth, it's quite saddening, right? He was obviously an intelligent individual, but after someone that he cares about goes through this instance, the DMIA, he has a lot of guilt. Guilt, tries to drink it all away with alcohol, which is not good for one's mental health or for their physical health. And then, of course, he throws up some more. I just really like how he's emphasizing how hurt he was and how devastated. And also, what I like about this as well is how EG reminds the readers that, wait, what? How can Tartarus know anyone who's gone into DMIA or a coma if Tartarus is known for never having anyone under him fail? Never failing their mind link, always coming back successfully to their bodies. The mission may not be successful, but everyone returns safely. That's one of the things that Tartarus is known about. And again, I already talked about that, but I think that's very telling about Tartarus as an individual. He's not typically a villain or a selfish person, not just a villain. They don't mind using other people, but in this instance, Koski, I would argue, is not just using people, he's truly working with them, trying to move forward together as a team rather than just him by himself. But I'm going a bit of a tangent right there. I like how Ichi's reminding the readers about this because again, I think it really adds a lot to Kosuke as an individual. He really learned from his instance with Saya, since he had so much guilt after Saya went DMIA. I can't help but feel that Todoro's probably made a promise to himself, Kosuke, that if he's going to go back into the digital world and mind link, that he needs to do his best that no one who works with him will ever go DMIA again. Thus, why he has a 100% success rate, or in terms of his team, in terms of no casualties. And then this last quote, it's quite literally the last portion of the story, but I do want to read it because I think it's a cool quote. Todoro's put another shopping bag on the table. Pardon me, and also what I like about that previous quote was Logomon. I like how he urges Ichi on. So when he says that he urges, I don't think that he's being demanding. Rather, Logomon sees that Todorus is caring for Ichi, and Logomon wants Ichi to become better, not just so they could mind link, but because I would argue Logomon does care about Ichi. And so what better way to become better than by taking care of yourself or by eating? Logomon's aware that Ichi hasn't been eating and probably not drinking very much, and thus he urges Ichi on. He urges with care rather than with impatience or with impunity. Hopefully that makes sense. As always, Logomon just being so awesome. Todoro's put the shopping bag on the table. Ichi's stomach growled as if on cue. Finally, he got to see what he'd been smelling, but had been too distracted to ask after since Todoro set foot in his apartment. Beef bowls with extra meat and pork miso soup. That sound tells me you've got the will to live. Go on, eat, he said to Ichi, who was too surprised to eat. Then take a shower. A nice, long, hot shower. You're young enough that ought to bring you back to life. What? Are you too weak to take the lid off? And spit those disposable chopsticks? Thanks for the food, Ichi said as he picked up the chopsticks and lifted the first bite to his mouth. So obviously Todoro's is here because he has some kind of mission that he's going to ask Ichi for. Because why else would he want him to be up and about? I think he wants him to be able to mind link. But I'm curious, is this mission going to have any relation to Leon and rescuing Leon? I guess we're going to have to wait and find out. So after waiting so long to get back to the main story, I have to say I'm very excited. This is everything that I could have wanted and more. It's great that this Seekers is finally coming back to the present timeline, and now we're pushing the story forward. I know I was complaining a little bit how we were spending so much time in the past, but I don't regret any of that time. I think when I come back and reread Seekers, since I'll reread it when everything's out already, I don't have to wait for a full week. I'm not going to regret having those first 8 parts focusing on the world or focusing on the lead up to how the Sons of Chaos was created. Because we got to know so much about Kosuke. I would argue even have that flashback, this instance with Kosuke being so warm towards Ichi and trying to have a conversation wouldn't be as emotionally impactful. So I just think that's really cool, and I really do appreciate that. And I was kind of concerned. We were spending so much time with the original Todorus group. I'm not going to lie, I was really liking the interaction between Kosuke, Yolene, and Saya. And I was like thinking to myself, oh man, we want to go back with Ichi by himself, right? Ichi's not really working with the team. Besides with Marvin sometime and Leon, but Leon's DMIA now, right? And so knowing that, I just didn't think that I didn't think that Ichi would be talking with Todorus so quickly. And so I really appreciated how the story's pacing seems to be really well done. Really looking forward to part 10. I believe it's part 10. Let me double check. Yeah, I am looking forward to part 10. And as always, I am enjoying Digimon Seekers. And I think I said this already, but all these new characters when they're introduced, even though Kosuke's already been introduced, I would argue that his introduction to the present timeline, that's another form of introduction. I'm just really loving the cast of Digimon Seekers, all the way from the minor characters such as Hatsumi, the secretary, Satsuki. We still don't know much about her, but I'm sure she's going to play a role eventually. They seem like cool individuals, and fleshing out Yolene, Kosuke, even Saya, who's no longer present. And I was already a fan of Ichi and Leon, and of course the professor. We got more detail about the professor from those flashback bits. All just really great. I'm really loving the cast. This might be my favorite cast so far from any Digimon property. And I think I am being biased because I think what I appreciate so much about it is the fact that it's an older cast. Everyone's over 18, and that's really cool. As much as I do enjoy the original anime and Try, they're all children essentially, right? And I think that's why I enjoyed Kuzuna so much, because everyone was in college age. And then even with Digimon Adventure 2, the beginning, only Ayori or Cody was still in high school, but he was a senior in high school, and that made sense because he was a year younger than everyone else. While everyone else, though, they were they were done with their schooling in terms of their teenage years, or in terms of their primary school years. Anyway, but I am really enjoying Seekers. My question for everyone this week is, oh no, I had it. Oh yeah, sorry. My question for everyone is, what do you guys think Tartarus is here for? Does he have a mission for Iggy? If it is a mission, what do you think that mission is going to entail? Personally, for me, I think he is here for a mission, and it wouldn't surprise me. Well, actually, no. We must remember. I think he is aware about Logomon and his interface, right? So maybe that's what the mission will pertain. I was originally going to say that the mission will be focusing on Saya and Leon, but then I came up with the other idea that maybe has pertaining to that door with the prototype Digimon. But they might be connected, right? Whatever is behind that door, whatever it is that he's trying to seek out, maybe has some connection to DMA and saving Saya. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Are you also looking forward to chapter 10? And again, my question is, what do you think is Tartarus? What is he up to? Does he have some kind of mission for EG? And what is that mission? Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it, everyone. Have a prodigious day and take care.